Can AI chatbots write Python code? Absolutely. Can we use them to write better Python code? Yes, also absolutely. But neither of these questions is really that interesting to me because as a Python educator, I'm interested in figuring out how AI chatbots can help us to learn Python better, to better understand the language, to improve our techniques and our fluency. And I have come up with 10 techniques for how you can do that. I've been using these techniques in my corporate training and also in my online training. And here in this video, I'm going to share with you 10 ways that AI chatbots can help you to learn Python better. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to need to provide some sample code, as you'll see. And so I'm going to show you code for two different exercises that I often give in my classes. And the first one is an exercise called guessing game. And basically what it's going to be is assign an integer from 0 to 100 to the variable number. And then ask the user to enter a guess and assign to guess. And then print, based on the user's input, print one of the following. And it's going to be either you got it, or too low, or too high. Okay, so far so good. The other exercise that I like to give people that we're going to use in these examples is Pig Latin, one word, where basically we're going to ask the user to enter a single word, all lowercase, and no punctuation. And then what we're going to do is check the first letter. And if the first letter is a vowel, that's going to be A, E, I, O, or U, then add a way to the word. Otherwise, move the first letter to the end and add a Y. Pig Latin, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, is a children's secret language. So as I show you these 10 techniques, we're going to draw upon these two exercises and use them. So time to look at the techniques themselves. And I really encourage you to try these out. No matter where you are in your Python journey, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or even an expert, these will help you to improve your skills, maybe not with a core language, but with particular libraries or particular techniques. And the first one is what I call a strategy session. And this is before writing any code, run your strategy by the chatbot. Don't have it write code for you. Now, why is this a useful technique? Because, well, it's an old saying that the best way to learn something is to teach something. And I can tell you, teaching programming for 30 years now, this is very true. When I am forced to teach something, I'm forced to really understand it well. And so in running the strategy by the chatbot, you are forced to think about, what do you really want to do? What are you planning to do? So I'm going to copy here. Let's do the guessing game here. So I'm just going to copy this here. And I'm going to say, in my intro Python class, we were given this exercise. We'll put that there. All right. And then we'll say, don't write any code for me, but do respond to my plan for solving this problem. All right. So number one is I'll assign an integer, say 42, to the variable number with equals the assignment operator. And then I'm going to say use input and strip to get the user's input and assign to guess. And then turn guess into an integer so that we can compare it with a number. And then use if and elif and else to produce the right output. Notice I'm not asking the chatbot to write any code. I'm asking to evaluate. I'm not even writing any code. I am basically saying, here's what I plan to do. Just to get to the point where I can plan, I need to be thinking, I need to be understanding. And there are going to be holes in my plan, and that's okay. The chatbot will then respond. And here we go. Looks like you've got the essential components. One thing to consider, what about if the user enters this? What if the person enters that? These are great things to keep in mind. Okay. Technique number 2 is called teaching back. So basically, what this idea is, it goes beyond the strategy session. So explain to the chatbot why and how working code actually works. Right, so I'm going to once again take this, I'm going to take the code here. Oh, I didn't actually write any code. Ha, 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 ha. All right, so I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say, let's do this. Here is some working code, working Python code. We can hope, right? And I'll say here, this is for, let's do the guessing game. So I'm going to say here, number, or I'll just say, yeah, number equals 42. And then guess equals, let's do int of input of enter a guess. Strip. All right. And then I'll say here, is that doing the right thing? Yeah. And then I'll say if guess equals number, then print you got it. And then elif guess is less than number, say print too low. And else I'll then say print, oops, I'm going to do that. Say here, print too high. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to explain what's going on. So in this program, I'm, double check that my explanation and understanding are right. So I'll say here, we get input from the user. Well, we assign to number. That's the easy part, right? And then we get input from the user, immediately transforming it, turning it into an integer with int. We assume that the user is giving us only digits in their string. That's important. All right, and then we compare with if and elif and else and print an appropriate output. Right? Do I understand this code well? And now the chatbot will tell us, do I understand it well? Did I make a mistake? Yes, your understanding is accurate, right? That is great. That is great. And again, being forced to explain is a great way to work on it. Okay, technique number 3, specify and compare. So solve a problem and then ask the chatbot to solve the same problem by feeding in the same specs. Compare the code that you wrote with its code. Okay, so I've already got code that I wrote here from the previous one, right? So I'm just going to copy this here. And I'm going to say here, right, here is a problem I was given in my Python course. Actually, I just want to copy this. Let's do this here. All right, we'll do it here. All right, please, show me your solution. And so I'm going to see the solution, and then I'm going to compare it with what I write. It's going to do a little artifact here that's very nice in Claude. I should add, by the way, I'm using Claude. You can use whatever chatbot you want. It so does not matter, right? You want to use ChatGPT, you want to use Gemini, you want to use Copilot, go for it. Doesn't matter. So number is this, guess is this, based on the user input, print this. Hey, that looks pretty similar to what I did, so I'm feeling pretty good. All right, so usually there'll be some difference between what you wrote and what the chatbot did, and that's okay and that's good. The comparison allows you to then sort of understand different techniques better. Number 4, this is one of my favorite techniques, the interview. So take some working code and ask the chatbot to interview you about it, asking repeated questions, right? So I'm going to take this code that we just wrote here. Where is it here? Right, I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to say, here is some working Python code. All right, please interview me about it, asking repeated questions. Now, remember that I'm only in an intro Python course, so don't make the questions too hard. But do make sure that I understand this code well with your questions. All right, and so now it's going to interview me. And if I do this, I've started giving this to my students for homework. I say, if you have some time and you want to practice, take the working code and have a chatbot interview. Okay, what do you think this program does overall? Right, this program lets me win the lottery. All right, probably not quite right. Okay, I think there might be an misunderstanding here. Okay, so it's not quite a lottery program, but it's going to ask me, and I can, of course, go on and answer and do all sorts of things with it. Okay, and you can do that for a long, long time. Technique number 5 is add a bug, which is take working code and add a bug to it and ask the chatbot to find the bug. Okay, so I'm, for this one, actually going to write some new code. I'm going to do the Pig Latin code. So I'm going to say here, word equals input. Here's some Python code to translate a word into Pig Latin. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say word equals input, enter a word, strip, and then I'll say if word 0 in ARU, print word plus way, and then I'll say else, print word from 1 to the end plus word 0 plus AY. All right, so and now what I want to do is I've put a bug in this code. Can you find it? Tell me where it is and what happens as a result. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say here, we're going to do word 1 to the end and word 1. Let's see if it finds the bug. Okay, look here, I found here we go. You're adding word 1 and 1 instead of word 0. Pretty nifty. Now, in order to create this bug, I needed to have a basic understanding of what's going on in the program. I also needed to have an expectation of what the chatbot would find. And so introducing an error and knowing what the error is going to be and making sure the chatbot gets the same error is pretty great. Okay, next is find the bug. Ask the chatbot to add a bug to the code and see if you can find it. So this is like the opposite of what we just did. So I'm going to put this code here. And so I'm going to say here is some working Pig Latin code in Python. Right? And then I'm going to say, please, I guess I should fix the bug, huh? Please add a bug to this code and see if I can find it. All right, so now it's going to be sneaky with me. Here's the same with a subtle bug added. Okay, do we see it? Word input, if word 0 in AIU, print word plus way. So I don't see it offhand, right? Let's just try word equals input, enter a word, strip. If word 0 in AIU, print word plus way, otherwise print word AY. I don't see it offhand. The problem is that the program will blow up if you enter an empty string. I honestly don't see the bug right away, but maybe not. All right. Oh, exactly right. Well, there you go. Okay, so I guess I was better than I thought at this. All right. Number 7 is reverse Socratic method. And basically, the Socratic method is where an instructor asks you, the student, many, many questions repeatedly. And by peppering you with those questions, the instructor knows, the teacher knows that you then know the subject, and you get a better sense of the subject. In what I call the reverse Socratic method, I ask the chatbot lots and lots of questions. And I usually do this in order to research a topic, not when I'm writing code, but when I'm sort of trying to learn about a new library, a new technique, or just understand something better. Now, it's very common. Let me show you what we could do with this. So if I say here, explain to me how import works in Python. Okay, a lot of people do this nowadays. It is well known that instead of going to Google or another search site, you can ask a question of a chatbot and get an answer. The problem is the answer is often not right or incomplete. And moreover, from a learning perspective, just reading it, you're not going to really internalize it. So where the reverse Socratic technique differs from this technique is I then keep going with many, many, many more questions. So I go through this and I say, this is great, but isn't it true that some modules are already loaded into memory before, when Python starts up? All right, and then it's going to have to answer that. Now, I can keep asking these questions, and one of the things that I like to do is then say, so in other words, you mean blah, 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 right? So, in other words, if I want to have a module loaded automatically into Python when it starts, I need to recompile the language, or is there a way to configure it to do that on my computer? Right? And If I ask 20, 30, 40 questions, I will get a much better understanding of what's going on. And I will also be sure that the chatbot is not making things up because I've asked so many questions and it just has to be consistent. And very often it will say, oh, you are right. I shouldn't have said that. Okay, technique number 8. I call this rubber duck programming because it's very, very similar to what people do with rubber duck programming on their desks. What does this mean? So basically, pair programming is where you have two different people working on the same computer, and the fact that they're communicating with each other, that before I code, before I ask you to code, maybe often it's like the person talking is not the person typing. There are different ways to do it. But what if there's no one else around? You can sort of kind of pair program with a rubber duck, meaning like a doll, a toy on your desk. And then before you do something, you tell it what you're going to do. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say here, I want to use you for rubber duck programming. Before I start to code, I'm going to describe what I plan to do little by little. Now, you could say this is like the strategy session technique, but it's broken up, right? So it's like every little bit of code I say, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Right? So I'm going to solve this problem. I'll just go back and get let's get the, here we go, pig Latin problem. Right? So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to say this. And so I'm going to say my first step in solving this problem is to use input to get input from the user and then stir strip to remove white space from the outside. What do you think? Don't write any code. Just tell me if this is a good way to move forward. So it's different from pair programming in that I'm not asking it to write code with me. It's different from true traditional rubber duck programming in that it's responding, but it's forcing me to state my ideas, my plans, and then I get a response back. Okay, we're almost there. Number 9, which is error archaeology. And basically what this means is I show the program, I show an error from running the program, and then I try to establish, right? So I basically, I show code and an error, basically a trace back. And I tell the chatbot why I think the error occurred. And it then sort of tells me if I'm right or not. So if I say here, let's just go back and get the Pig Latin translator. Right, and so here, do this. So I'm going to say here word equals enter a word, strip. Okay, fine. So now I'm going to say here, apple, and it works just fine, right? What if I say though, let's say just an empty string, just as the chatbot suggested earlier. So now I'm going to say here, I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to go here. So I have this Python code. And then I got this exception backtrace. I'm just going to grab everything there, which is surprisingly tough in Jupyter. It's actually a little annoying. There we go. There we go. Okay, and so I'm going to go here. Oops. So I think this is because my string didn't have an index 0 because it's the empty string. So I got this error. Is that a good assessment? Now you can add bugs to your code and see, right? So my assessment is straight up spot on. Yay me. All right, and the final 10th technique is code review. Now you could argue this is not really a learning technique, but I think it is, right? I definitely think it is because we show the chatbot our code and ask for it to respond as a senior developer. Isn't it better to get this sort of tech, review or code review back before someone actually does it at work? So I'm going to say here, here is some Python code. And then I'm going to say, as a senior developer, tell me, do a code review and tell me what you think. And so it'll come back and say, well, you could have done this better, you could have done that better, right here are some key issues, and so on and so forth. If you incorporate these 10 techniques into your learning plan for Python, if you use one or two of these techniques with exercises that you do in class, I promise you that your Python skills will improve, you will understand the language better, you will understand how to use it better, And when the time comes and you want to use chatbots to improve your code or to work with you with your code, you will be able to respond, use them better. You'll be able to identify where they are making big mistakes, because they do make big mistakes, and thus you will be able to really use them the way that senior developers do, which is effectively as an assistant and not as something writing code instead of us. I hope this was interesting and useful. Tell me how you are using AI to improve your Python learning. I would love to hear about additional techniques. I'm always looking for new ones. Tell me what you think. Leave some comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you soon with lots more about Python and pandas and everything in between.